Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today we're talking about India-Pakistan relations. There have been some news items that have appeared telling us that Indian lawmakers want the portrait of Quaid-e-Azam removed from the Aligarh Muslim University. And while this fracas was going on, the portrait went missing mysteriously. And this is the true face of BJP, as they were threatening the students for having that portrait in the premises of that university. It is an issue that has been blown out of proportion. We'll talk a bit about that. But more importantly, we'll be talking about the Indian water terrorism against Pakistan. They have violated the Indus Water Treaty. We'll be talking about that in detail as well. And we'll also be talking about the Indian brutalities in Kashmir that are going on unabated. Let's begin the conversation. I'd like to introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me for this conversation today, we have, first of all, Yasir Masood Saab with us, and joining him, we have Raja Qaiser. Thank you very much for being here. Let's start with this controversy that has emerged, which to my mind really is no controversy at all, but it has been blown out of proportion. And this whole demand of the Indian lawmaker who wants to have the portrait of Quaid-e-Azam removed from Aligarh University, what does it say about the Indian mindset to begin with? That is the real question over here. It depicts the hatred that the Indian Hindu BJP followers have for Pakistan. So if you could please elaborate on this mindset.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Waqas, this has been going on since the BJP came into power, even before that. I will turn the clock back to the history that they are following the footprints of Savarkar's Hindutva in true letter and spirit since BJP has reigned its power. And it's not the first episode. It's like it's a kind of recurrent theme which is happening over and over again in India. So this mindset is completely, it depicts not only to Pakistan but to the whole world that this is the true and the real face of India, because they are anti-Pakistanis as well, they are anti-minorities, they are anti-Muslims as well. So every now and then, probably on every other day, things are happening against the minorities, especially the Muslim community. Now, I would give you an example. The party president, Mr. Amit Shah, in 2014, he arranged a pogrom in one of the part of India, and then he was gifted with this, it was like a gift for him that he became the party president, because he had done a kind of, an act which was against the Muslim community. So this is the true picture of the BJP. This is their manifesto, that the more they grind the Muslim community, the more they are against the minorities, they will be gifted with such prizes like he became the party president. And there are many examples of this. Now, the problem is that if it turns out against Pakistan, because you see, they are using these slogans for their political purposes as well, anti-Pakistan slogans. And Pakistan since 1990s have discarded this kind of politics. We do not follow any anti-Indian or anti-Hindu campaigns for our political gains or achieve popularity. Otherwise, we see that in India, it looks like that the ingrown jingoism and extremism is becoming the norm of the community of India. Now you see it is being reflected in each and every other aspects, or each and every other professions. Let's put it this way, that even Indian media, if you see their language against Pakistan, if you see their language against their own community like Muslim or other anti-minority, you would see a clear bifurcation that they are very harsh, their language, their tone, and the comments they made against them. But by doing this, I think so they are just would be able to inflict their own wounds, what India is up to, because India, as they call it, that they are the secular, the nation, where is the secular face of India? So by doing this, I think so India is defaming itself, not only in the eyes of Pakistan, but to the entire world. On part of us, we need to expose this face of India. Unfortunately, India is the best masters to camouflage their own weaknesses, and they are highlighting the the weaknesses of Pakistan at the international forum or at the international arena. On part of us, we need to further highlight this, that look what India is doing in Kashmir, what India is doing to its own people, and eventually what happens with that. The outcome is that people turn against their own government, like the minorities, even Hindu community. I'm not saying that the whole India has the mindset of BJP. There are Hindus, the other communities who are against their own policies. But if they carry on with such rhetoric against their own people, it is not going to be in the benefit of India itself as well as for Pakistan.
Absolutely. Rajasthan, what's your take on this matter? What do you think about the controversy that has been stirred up on the portrait of Quaid-e-Azam? Did they just wake up after 70 years and decide that the portrait shouldn't be there anymore? It doesn't really make much sense. It just exposes the hatred and the attitude of the Indian BJP, Hindu, fascist sort of mindset. What's your opinion on this?
Well, thank you, Waqas. This is a best and the real-time illustration of a structural transformation which India is undergoing right now. If you just go by the genealogical lineage and the historical and sociological lineage of India being, a civilizational, the tenets and the undercurrents of India as a civilization, it had been a heterogeneous, synchronous and a syncretic tradition. And the philosophical basis of this India as a nation state after the independence were to be based on the Nehruvian principles. Nehruvian principles of liberalism, secularism, and at the same time composite culture, liberal democracy. So all these things, they constituted India, or they used to be a normative discourse for the existence of India. But you see, the Congress being in power for nearly 1.5 decades since its independence, so there had been a severe and a serious backlash by the conservative outfits or the orthodox outfits within the India. This Shivram Munje, along with this Hajwar, and plus Savarkar, and these all people, they had been the pleader or they had been the hate mongers even that time as well. This formation of the Janata Party, basically it had an alliance with there had been a great split within the Congress, in the ranks of the Congress, nearly around 1971-72, when Indira Gandhi had developed differences with the senior leaders within her own party, and that led to the split of that what is famously known as Indicate and Syndicate. So Indira's faction and a faction that was being led by Kamraj Nadar. So that led to the culmination of these people, Lal Krishna Advani, Vajpayee, and eventually Morarji Desai, and they also combined together and they formed a Janata Party, which was a rebuttal or which was a counter rhetoric to this India's liberal mantra, and that had its belief that this India's composite culture should be replaced by the majoritarian culture. It should be replaced by Hindutva. It should be replaced by the Hindu majoritarian values. So this is something which is becoming more and more accentuated after the decade of the 1980s. What had been more ubiquitous during that decade of 1980s and 90s was the rise of coalitional politics, caste politics, and regional parties like All Anna, India Dravida, Munitra, Kazagam, and there have been parties like that. The regional parties with the regional outlook, they had been dominating on the face of the center stage of India's domestic politics. So it didn't let BJP to flex its wings or to extend its agenda. But with the complete annihilation of this Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, USSR, there had been a decline for the acceptance of the socialist policies around the world. and Congress, had a pro-socialist bent of mind. So it came under, a kind of a non-legitimacy, and then there had been a rise of rampant capitalism, neoliberalism, India's opening up, India being a huge market, and India being, having the, one of top 10 largest purchasing power parity. So, it basically led to the acceptance of BJP more as compared to any other party. Because you see, what Hindu nationalism and these Hindu nationalistic parties are intrinsically capitalist. They have the capitalistic orientation, and even if you go by the history, this term Hindu Baniya was actually the vindication of this very same thing. Hindus, they had a capitalist orientation. So with now, in past 1 decade or so, we see right wing is consolidating its bases in India, and they are challenging the philosophical traditions of and the intellectual traditions of narrow state model. And we see secularism is under jeopardy right now in India.
And pluralism as well.
Pluralism as well. There is rise of ethnic violence, there is rise of communal violence, there is rise of human rights abuses. India is almost becoming New Delhi is becoming a kind of a rape capital. The more number of there had not been a more number of rapes in any other country or any other city like reported in last 3 years in New Delhi. So these things, they actually accentuate and demonstrate a phenomena that.
But Raja Saab, this whole controversy of having the Qaid's portrait removed from Aligarh's premises, it was a student union office where the portrait was hung, and then mysteriously the portrait went missing when this fracas started, and there were threats being issued to the students of Aligarh University. What does that indicate to you?
This is not the first incidents. You see, there had been a very, resonating controversy of JNU, if you could call up nearly 2 years ago, when Kanhaiya Kumar and Umar Khalid and this Shaila Rashid, these guys who started a movement within the Jawaharlal Nehru University.
Against Kashmiri students.
Yeah, against the Kashmiri students, in defense of the Kashmiri students, and against the outright discrimination and against the human rights abuses. So you might have seen that Indian media, it went berserk, and they went hounded against those students and all that. Plus Taj Mahal controversies there, these kind of things, they hold a surfacial and a ceremonial significance, because they reflect a mindset. They reflect a mindset of non-acceptance, they reflect a mindset of non-accommodativeness, they reflect a mindset of intolerance at large. So these things, they actually tell, you see, the book of Jaswant Singh, when he wrote Jinnah, Partition and Independence, it led, it brewed a huge amount of wrath into the entire India. Why he, praised or why he applauded Jinnah for, his leadership and all that. So these kind of incidents, they actually reflect a bent of mind that tells how narrow, how parochial, and how skewed vision this Hindutva has for the rest of the ethnic minorities, communities, and
Don't you think the biggest indication would be of what they did to Mahatma Gandhi? Isn't that a case in point? Let's begin with that. They were the first terrorists of India who killed the father of their own nation. What does that say about?
Yeah, Godse, if you could read his speech which he made in the court, why I killed Gandhi. That in itself reflects.
And then they went ahead and deified Mr. Godse for killing Mahatma Gandhi. There are temples erected in his.
What could be worse and most ironical and ignominical than a fact BJP and its stalwarts and its and the cohorts and the like-minded people with the like-minded ideology are defending the rapists of Asifa. So what can be more poignantly tragic than this fact? The people, 4 people who have confirmed their indictment who have confirmed their presence and who accepted, they did it to terrorize the local nomadic community which was residing over there. So, and they, held her hostage for nearly 7 days, and they, this is the most heinous human rights violation one could ever think of. So, with this kind of thing, and you see, there are the people who are actually intimidating and threatening the lawyers who are fighting for her. They are actually, cautioning, and they are threatening the people who are raising fund for the legal tribulation.
And they're also threatening journalists who are speaking up against the kind of atmosphere that is being created within India these days by the BJP and their cohorts.
And if you see in 2016, I mean, let me quickly quote 2 facts, empirical evidences. This is not what I am saying. Very recently in 2018, just 2 weeks before, 50 retired Indian civil servants of grade 21 and 22, they wrote a letter to Prime Minister Modi lamenting and condemning the rising intolerance and promoting a Hindu myopic agenda within the Nehruan state, which they believed is going to be disastrous and will be dastardly disastrous for Indian secularism. And before this, if you could call up in 2015 and 2016, there were around 50 odd people who returned their civil awards and honors, which were endowed to them by the Indian government.
Including Arundhati Roy, I think.
Including Arundhati Roy, who believed that Indian government is promoting an agenda of intolerance. It is making the life of minorities almost next to impossible, and it is becoming an unlivable. India is becoming an unlivable place where the space for the alternative and the dissenting voices is not only shrinking but dwindling at large. So, this is what the sorry state of affairs is right now.
Well, let's move on to the more important aspect, and that is, which is far more concerning, very worrying for us, and this is something that has to be taken up on a war footing, and that is already been discussed in the National Assembly. The National Security Council wants the government to forcefully pursue the water treaty violations by India with the World Bank. We are hoping that something concrete is going to come out of it. In your opinion, do you think that the decision taken by the committee to pursue the violations of the Indus Water Treaty by India at the World Bank are going to yield some results? Because this is a very serious issue. When we talk about this particular sowing season, our next cash crop, which is a major cash crop for Pakistan, is cotton. And already the cotton sowing has been delayed in Sindh, in southern Punjab, because of the lack of water. There's no water to irrigate the fields. So what's your point? What do you think is going to happen now that we're going to move forward in this direction?
As you just mentioned, that we have to take this issue on war footing. It's beyond any shadow of a doubt, because it's a very serious issue. And of late, India has been on top of everything. India has been threatening Pakistan many times to dry out Pakistan. I would like to quote one thing. After the Uri attack, in retaliation, Prime Minister Modi commented that blood and water cannot flow together. I mean, this is the mindset. I mean, with all its manifestation, India is threatening Pakistan, and particularly this bit, I mean, the water terrorism. This is going to have a very drastic and serious implications in the coming time for Pakistan, because you see 6 major rivers, they flow from India, from the Indian-held Kashmir towards Pakistan. And it is the completely a blatant violation of the Indus Water Treaty. Pakistan has to take some serious actions against this water terrorism which is emanating from Indian side. And for that very purpose, I think so, they are on the right track, that we don't have any other choice rather to knock doors at the United Nations or the World Bank or other leading players of the world. Must be taken in confidence that this will tantamount to be a war in itself without declaring a war. And as expected by many war experts, that the next war could be the reason of next war could be between India, could be water. So in that very purpose, I think so, and as you know that it's already both countries are nuclear powers. So if it occurs this way, And if India, continue with this kind of threatening policies of drying out Pakistan, Pakistan will not be left with any other choice rather than going to the international community and exposing their real face. Instead, when Pakistan, try to build some dams in our territory, India always object to that. And even if I would quote another example, that if Pakistan like Pakistan have many projects with China under the ambit of CPAC, and if it is in that territory, then also again have India have issues and rejection against those projects. But look what India is doing. They are building dams on their territory, and it is as I mentioned, that it is in open violation of the Indus Water Treaty. This is an issue where it has to be taken very seriously from Pakistani side.
Absolutely. Raja Sahab, what's your comment on this after the completion of the controversial Kishanganga Dam and the Ratle Dam as well? How are we going to negotiate the Indus Water Treaty, which has already been violated by India? Now, it's beyond the point where we're talking about a violation occurring in the future. It has already occurred, and we are now paying the price of that violation because there's no water to irrigate our fields.
Well, Waqas, let me first lament, criticize, and first of all, let me condemn this our anachronistic foreign policy and base diplomacy, which I consider responsible for many such kind of mayhems which we are facing right now. We were, miscalculated, or we did not judge the gravity of the issue when these things were taking place in 2004, 5 and 6. They fell onto our deaf ears, and the people who were cautioning this thing by then, this is going to be very disastrous because it is going to encourage India to initiate many projects like this, because when Baglayar was underway and when Baglayar was taking place, so we had been very casually taking that up. And let me reiterate my point, which I, in last year program I mentioned as well. What is even worst and what is even more ironical than any other thing is that Pakistan always pursues the issues of legal significance through bureaucrats. I mean, that's something that does not speak any sense to me. You should be having a very competent team of international lawyers. You see, every single dispute which you share with India holds the legal significance, and you are sending your bureaucrats to represent you on that thing. A bureaucrat is trained in a certain way. He has limitations, he has constraints on his decision making, he has to follow certain SOPs, he has to see thing into that particular context, a bureaucratic context. So we all are well familiar to this thing, what Jamaat al-Isha did to the cause of Pakistan's water crisis. So this is how you have appointed an Indus Water Commissioner who happens to be a bureaucrat. He goes there with a huge convoy of the people. They they meet, they weep, and they leave. So actually this kind of attitude we are contesting India, right? You see, even on this issue of Kulbhushan Yadav, see what was the point of difference where India managed to take a lead. They had employed a better lawyer to fight their case into the International Court of Justice. Otherwise, every single sane individual or the one who had even a little tinge of a legal acumen was of the opinion that this issue does not fall into the jurisdiction or the domain of International Court of Justice. But still they managed to get a leeway out of the International Court of Justice. So this is a huge moment of silence where we need to learn a fact. That's doing self-introspection is not always harmful. We need to look at the things where we have committed blunders. We need to also, because identification is the first step towards rectification. With this amount of denial that everything is going all right and probably we are combating India with a befitting response on every front, I mean sounds good for media consumption or for intellectual consumption, that sounds okay. But on the realistic grounds, that does not convey you the real picture which is going around. When the real picture is that India is making a headway in diplomacy everywhere, and we are lagging behind, and we are marginally lagging behind. So, over this, now coming to this Indus Water Treaty, see, the mechanism is clear, all the treaty provisions are written, international law has very explicit directions on to the rights of the upper riparians and the lower riparian states. It has mentioned to what an extent you can build on the dams.
And we have also foregone our rights.
But Waqas, let's again concede to a fact. It is also mentioned into the Indus Water Treaty that if a country fails to manage the pondages for the storage of the water, so and the water it goes in a waste, then the next party has the right to utilize the water, because water is a resource.
As far as I understand, the Indus Water Treaty gave the western rivers to Pakistan, all three of them, including Jhelum, and now we are seeing that they were allowed to use water for non-consumptive uses. What does that even mean?
The reason being because you haven't been able to build pondages, and they take an argument that the water is a resource and it goes in a waste.
Right.
Pakistan has not built dams, pondages, or the water storage mechanism, water reservoirs. So and this gives them a leeway to use the water. So when we need to concede where we are wrong, or where we have been on the receiving end, we need to concede that fact. And probably this is the high time where we need to have a very sound
competent
environmental policy.
Yes. Well, competence seems to be the question here.
Which we haven't securitized as of yet. We still believe that our high politics surrounds and revolve around this military and the strategic domain. We are not it's kind of an ostrich approach. We are not conceding a fact. Even your ministers onto the floor of the National Assembly, they are making a revelation that in next 20 to 25 years probably we would be we would be having
no water at all.
Fresh water. Yes. Our fresh water reserves are depleting. Your temperature is increasing. You see this Nawab Shah's temperature 2-3 days before had been the hottest ever in the history. April's temperature 51. It went to 51 degrees centigrade. I mean, these things are sounding an apocalypse, and probably we need to realize a fact that these things merit our attention, and they merit our serious attention, and they kind of necessitate a kind of an emergency situation where we need to plan, and we need to plan soundly about these things and the challenges which are emanating from this milieu. Otherwise, the situation is pretty bleak, and the prospective scenario is very catastrophic.
Well, one good part about the meeting or the committee or the Council of Common Interests came up with was a water policy. We've been waiting for the water policy for Pakistan for quite some time, but that came out. What it actually entails, we don't have the details at the moment, but the committee said that the approval of the water policy and the signing of the charter is a significant achievement. And here's the kicker: if properly implemented, could prove instrumental in averting the water crisis that is seriously threatening Pakistan. Now, here is the question: what do they mean by if? If they've come up with the policy, what is the problem in implementing that policy? Why is it a big if? Isn't it their job to implement the policy that they've come up with? I mean, I don't understand that. Please, if you could elaborate.
Of course, it's a job of implementation, but the problem is that we don't have the policy in black and white now. So, first of all, we have to have a policy. Of course, there is water crisis, but I would like to quote one thing, that on part of us, as my colleague just mentioned, that introspection is very much needed. For example, like in 1951, we had the water per capita water capacity of 5,500, which has come down to a meager source of 950 cubic meter. So, and also we have the water storage capacity of 30 days, or international threshold is about 120 days.
400 days actually.
400 days.
Yes.
So we are lagging behind in all respect, and we are relying on those six rivers. We haven't capitalized or worked on our own reservoirs. At the same time, we have to work on these issues, because simultaneously we have to build some alternatives. But unfortunately, up till now, we haven't worked on that. And yes, there is a twist in that comment, that if it is being implemented, so it means that
whose job is it to implement it?
Exactly, and they're not pretty confident about their own policy up till now, that if it is implemented. So as I mentioned, that first there has to be a policy, and then obviously it is their job to implement it. So and this is a very serious issue. I mean, it cannot be taken so lightly, that if it is not implemented, if it is implemented or there are issues between the two sides, I mean, Pakistan has to have a very proper response to that. If there has to be a team of experts who first devise a policy which is in the benefit of Pakistan, obviously, and that is also acceptable to India. Otherwise, if you don't work on that, they will be building on dams on their territory, and they will be threatening as they are.
Of course, that's a separate issue which we were talking about earlier, but this water policy I was talking about was the internal water policy, the division of water between the provinces of Pakistan. Raja Saab, in your opinion, why is it an if about the internal policy or water distribution policy in Pakistan? Why is it a question mark whether it will be implemented or not?
Well, because I'm rather very critical of these committees and these, the modus operandi of the policy making in Pakistan. For committee, I often quote a very famous, phrase that a camel is a horse made by a committee. So, but at the same time, and in the meanwhile, if you talk about the policy making in Pakistan, that has a great disconnect from the ground realities, from the grassroots realities. We have had a very poor capital of making policies. We just do what we keep on replicating this policy.
Reactionary policies.
No, reactionary, and at times, like Pakistan local bodies, we
completely absent.
We completely and wholly and solely plagiarize and replicate someone else existingly made policies of some other country, which has
no bearing in Pakistan.
Which has no bearing in Pakistan, which has a different demography, which has a different imperatives, which has
all different
altogether niceties.
Different criteria altogether.
So, first and the fundamental question that do we have any environmental
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We need to take an urgent short break over here. So we'll just take a short break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back after that break. We're talking about Indian brutalities in Kashmir now. Let's move on, sir, because the brutality that India is already causing in Pakistan as a result of the water terrorism, it doesn't end there, because the amount of excesses that are going on against the hapless people of Kashmir, every day we hear heartrending stories that emerge from the Kashmir Valley, where people are being brutalized on a daily basis. Still no response from the international community. When are we going to get that response? What is it that we are lacking in our message, the way we deliver our message? What is the issue there? Why the rest of the world cannot see the misery and plight of the Kashmiris?
I think we are lacking and we are not lacking, because in a sense Pakistan has been highlighting these brutalities for quite some time now. And especially since the time when BJP came into power, we have seen this accentuation of brutalities and mayhem in Kashmir. So on part of us, we are doing our bit. But as far as international community is concerned, they have turned a blind eye towards all these atrocities in Kashmir. And to me, it looks like that it's not possible that they are not aware what's happening in Kashmir. They're completely aware that what is happening, but as I just mentioned, that they're just turning it their blind eye, because it's not in the best, it's not in their interest. They're least bothered about Kashmir. It looks like that. But you see, for how long, as you just asked in your question, that for how long it will be carried on like this, because for how long the Kashmiri people will be grinded and pulverized at the hands of, of the BJP mindset and their policies, or or what India is doing to them. So I think so that we need to further, enhance and further chisel up our skills of foreign policy, that we need to transcend this message across the continents. And for that very purpose, I think so we need to devise and we need to reshape, rekindle our policy for that purpose, that why it is not happening, we need to knock the doors of international community and let them realize that this is the real face of India. I think so because India, what they want to do is they want to keep it unilateral, the Kashmir issue. They're not even ready to talk to Pakistan about that. But it's not unilateral, it's not even bilateral, it's not even trilateral. It's a worldly affair now. The whole world knows about it, but it's another matter that why they're turning their blind eye towards all these atrocities. On part of Pakistan, we need to further focus on this. The more we expose India's real face, the more we will be able to,
get the message
get
across.
the message of, exposing India, because it's a matter of how well we expose India.
Right.
Because India, they are very good in exposing us. So exactly the same way we need to respond them in the same coins.
Raja Sahab, any comments?
There is a dichotomy, and the dichotomy is that India holds a consumerist attention. Rest of the world sees India as a market. So if India is doing anything, if India is committing any atrocity, if there is growing amount of intolerance, if there is any kind
So
of
the international policy is to look the other way.
Yeah, if there is any anomaly, so that gets completely unnoticed in the guise of consumerist, economic, capitalist interests.
And national interest.
You see how Indian Cricket Board happens to dictate the entire cricket playing nations in itself is a big time vindication and accentuation of this fact. How India
They behave like a mafia.
Yeah, how they behave like a mafia just because on the power of their capital. So that is how, and that is what is happening in the case of Kashmir as well. It's probably one of the major tragedies of the modern times, and it is perhaps the most ironical, and it is perhaps the most agonizing and the most heart-piercing tragedies of the modern times. The way an organized pogrom, the way an organized ethnic genocide and ethnic cleansing right now is taking place in Indian-held Kashmir is actually beyond agonizing, and it is beyond condemnation. But still, the international community pays no heed to this thing, because India, it has kind of established an iron curtain with, between Kashmir and the rest of the world. I recently was reading an article written by a guy who happens to be a Kashmiri as well, Bisharat Peer. He is also the author of the book Curfewed Nights, and he also was the one who wrote the script for Haider movie. So, the entire argumentation was pivoting around one central line, and said, okay, fine, we accept for a moment that guns to us were given by Pakistan, they were supplemented to us by Pakistan, or it was an externally orchestrated militancy. But what about stones? Aren't they our own? They are not getting abetted, or they are not getting sent by any other country. This stone throwing in itself reflects this thing, that we have the genuine resentment.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your views with PTV World. Well, you heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we always say that do draw your own conclusions from what you've heard. We hope and we pray that the Indians and Pakistanis both are able to see the light at and do something for the people of their country for a change, and move away from the warlike situation that is developing in the region, which is good for nobody. And on that note, and with that hope, it's goodbye.